Gentlemen, we got to get into this story. Now, this story, I know Jez Corden just wrote a story, but I got to give credit where credit is due to the story that I originally found and used for today's story. This comes to Tech for Gamers. Now, of course, I have already added it to the show notes. So if you want to click on it, you can. It was written on September 14th, 2025. Shazir Zahid is the author of today's article, and it goes on to say Battlefield 6 devs say optimizing for the Xbox Series S made the overall game better and more stable. What do you know about that, Crispy Bomb? Oh my God. So here we go. Story highlights, and this is something that they do over at Windows Central, which I like. They put like a block of like really good information to kind of start the article. And the story highlight goes on to say this, ladies and gentlemen. Battlefield 6's technical director says that the limited memory of the Xbox Series S proved to be a challenge for the studio. As such, they spent time optimizing the game's memory, which improved the game's overall performance and stability. It goes on to say most devs blame the Xbox Series S for being underwhelming, but the truth is that they're just too lazy. Now, I mean, I don't like to support the whole lazy dev thing. What I will say is when you have a publisher like EA that has this monster-sized game in Battlefield 6 and 4 studios working on this game, it's no longer just DICE, right? It's now 4 studios. They took the Call of Duty way of making games and they incorporated it into Battlefield 6. And it turns out that Battlefield 6 looks really good. I'm actually buying it. I don't know how much of the multiplayer I'm going to play because I'm going to be like neck deep in Black Ops 7, but I cannot wait to play the single player game. I'm very excited for that. But the story goes on to say, Crispy Bomb, since its release in 2020, developers and gamers have been bashing the budget Xbox Series S console for holding back game development and not being powerful enough for the latest modern AAA games. Now, Battlefield 6 devs have also stated the problems that they encountered with the game's development on the Xbox Series S. However, for once, they actually put in the effort into the game's optimization, and the process resulted in an overall game running better and more stable. But get this, folks, that means it's running better now on the Series X, the PS5, the PS5 Pro, and PC. And it's really interesting because, again, this is right from the story, folks. EA acknowledged that the Series S has less memory than a mid-spec PC and that the game was continuously crashing 6 to 12 months ago on the budgeted console. As such, the team focused in optimizing the game's memory overall and specifically for the Xbox Series S. And in closing, the end result, Crispy, was that the game was more stable and performed better on all platforms thanks to this new memory optimization. Bro, that is great to hear. And again, when you have a big corporation or a big platform like EA, you have the money, you have the manpower. The reason why you see some development teams not optimize or skip the X and S altogether is because they don't have that money. They don't have that backing. They don't have the time. So they have to pick something that they know that is going to sell, or at least they hope it's going to sell. And that's why you see a lot of the games go to Switch 2 and PlayStation, even PlayStation 4 and 5 rather than Xbox. But this is great news. And it does kind of kick down the door on some narratives. Crispy Bomb, let's get your thoughts on this, man.
The good old potato.
Yeah.
It's always funny how we constantly see this, like, nobody's talking about this, really, because they don't want to admit that, it's just the developer just, maybe didn't have the budget. Let's not just say lazy, because maybe the budget wasn't there and they went with PlayStation first. But I see a lot of times that, the game don't necessarily run that great when they go just to PlayStation either. So maybe it's just they don't know how to optimize very well or something like that. And they figured, hey, that's the bigger player base. Let's go there first. In realism, like, if you're going to say the Series S holds back stuff, well, we could talk about that for days, because apparently that's happened our entire lifetime. And, when they came out with games on one system that was older, and then we have a whole new generation, they're still releasing those said games on that old system. Apparently that was holding everything back. I mean, it's a little redundant at this point, but people probably, if one dev comes out in a couple weeks or something and says, oh, it was difficult, like, we're always going to get that back and forth on that. But in realism, Battlefield said, hey, like, if we spec for this, it'll probably run better on all these others. And they took the time and they did it. And sure enough, they're saying that. And also, I didn't see a lot of people complaining too much about the beta. There's a lot of, matchmaking and stuff like that. That's not necessarily what they're talking about here. They're talking about, frame rate and visuals and all the, just, is the game skipping around and stuff like that. Because we've all experienced those things. And, maybe they're, it's a knock on wood scenario. Maybe they don't have anything happen when it actually launches. But, I really look at it, and I believe that Xbox is positioned even better now. And I think some of these devs are realizing that as time goes on, the way they're setting it up is it's going to be even less work for them to port these games over. So in time, I think you're going to realize that the Series S was really good. And I think these developers especially are going to realize that it was so important to release these two SKUs right off rip at the same time, give them time to learn this new ecosystem and how it's going to work. And that's going to help them when we see it go to basically a Windows scenario. So once that happens, I'm sure there's going to be the same deal. Oh, something's holding something back, but don't listen to those people. I mean, it's just, that developer has made their choice, and their choice was to go to PlayStation first. And some of them we still believe are probably timed, money bag exclusive type deals. So maybe one day we'll find out the truth on some of those. So other than that, I mean, the Series S is I'm going to buy one, and hopefully it goes down a little bit, because all we see is the prices go up. Hopefully it goes down for the holidays, and I'm going to pick one up and have it in the bedroom, because the One X is finally, it's done. But I bought it a while ago. So, it's time for something new, and why not go with the little guy that is powerful? And I think a lot of people are going to be looking at that a little differently now with the prices this holiday, and they're going to appreciate that they have that option.
I mean, listen, again, if you have the money, I would always suggest buy the PlayStation 5 or the Series X, right? I wouldn't say the Pro, because the more that the Pro at its $800 price point, again, folks, I'm not going to tell you to spend your money. You spend your money how you want to spend it. But like, for instance, there's been some big controversy on the last couple of big games that released, Borderlands being one of them. No PS5 Pro, additive. Basically, they didn't enhance it in any way for the PlayStation 5 Pro. So the Pro is running it exactly how the PS5 is running it. And it's not the only game. I mean, again, it's money, folks. Extra development time and, additional consoles is extra development time, and that costs money. The Series S, though, I'm glad to know that there are people willing to take the time to give it that little extra TLC, Fuzzy Belvedere. And again, is it a medium spec PC? It's not. It's a lower spec PC for sure. But that also runs into the same conversation of, well, when they make a game for PC, they have to take everything into account. They have to figure out the people that are going to be playing, like the Hargeets, for instance, that are playing on 5090s. His PC is probably at the $7,000 PC. He doesn't shy away from that. He spends the money. But there are a lot of gamers playing on budgeted PCs because that's all they can afford, and there's nothing wrong with that. So this is one of those instances where I think a lot of the negativity for the Series S, and again, I'm not saying, you'll never hear me say lazy devs. I don't like that term, because there's a lot in the middle, right? Series S lazy devs. I know it's a go-to for some people. It's not my go-to. I do think development of games is incredibly hard. It's incredibly expensive, and we don't have the funding. You sometimes got to make the big choices, and the choices is, where do you want to put your game on a console that has 80 million plus consoles out in the wild? That's the PlayStation 5. It just makes sense. Nintendo Switch, 100 million plus, right? So I understand. But I am glad to know that when people take their time, and Larian Studios did this a couple of years ago with Baldur's Gate 3. I know you had made mention of that, Fuzzy. That's a fact. And they literally came out and said, because of the Series S, we were able to make the big boy versions even better. It's not the first time we've heard that, right? And again, this is a big game. Is it going to be as big as Call of Duty? I don't know so much about that. I think people who enjoy this game are going to enjoy it. I think it's going to have its player base. Do I think it's going to be eating the lunch of Black Ops 7? The answer is not on its best day. Could it lace up the boots of Call of Duty? I'm just saying. That's just me. And I think that, and again, you've heard me say this before, the outfits thing, I know we saw the first 4 that are going to be available for multiplayer on Call of Duty. They don't look military like, they look very futuristic to me. I don't know why I can't bring some of my other stuff forward. Okay, it's fine, but I like that those outfits. I don't want to veer off the road here, but those outfits for for Battlefield 6, garbage. But anyway, let's bring it back onto the road. Fuzzy Belvedere, let's get your hot take on this, because you are a tech guy. You have the understanding and the know-how on it, what it takes for development. Are you surprised by Battlefield 6 actually being better on the big boy versions because of the potato?
No, and I've made mention of it before. I think not that I have a unique understanding of development as far as that's concerned, but from a tech standpoint, the biggest drawback is that with PlayStation being the market leader, the PS4 and PS5 dev kits aren't that much different. It was kind of like the way the Xbox One versus the Xbox One X dev kits were, where it was iterative. It was basically the same style as far as how you optimize, and you could just turn a few more things up. With these dev kits, or the tools, as Sean would say, for Xbox, it was designed similar to how they did the Xbox One X, but it was meant so that way, if you build the game based off the Series S, you could turn all the bells and whistles up for the Series X, and it should make things easier. Now, there is supposed to be a way to downsize or work backwards from building it for the Series X and get it to work on the Series S, but then the issue that they were probably running into, and it sounds like that was the case how they initially set it up, you're going to run into memory issues. So if you're starting on the Series X and try to downscale it to the Series S, that's part of the drawback. But if you build it based on the Series S and work your way up, then it's going to make it that much easier for the optimization. And when you go to turn all the bells and whistles up, it's much easier at that point. Well, I won't say much easier, but it seems to work better doing it that way. Crispy touched on a great point earlier when it comes to looking at the last generation on how that holds us back. Like, they're still making games for the PS4. Now, they're not making as many for the Xbox One, mainly because Xbox has basically told them, don't bother, stop making them. We've stopped issuing dev kits for the Xbox One. So devs aren't really paying as much attention to the Xbox One, but they're still over 100 million PS4s out there, so they're still going to build games for PS4. Like, I thought it was kind of funny just this past week, Marvel Rivals, which was a next gen only title, finally released on the PS4 just last week. It's
Yeah,
mainly
shocking.
because there's a lot of people still on that PS4 this generation. So because of things like that, you're always going to have that be like your I guess baseline, or your device that's going to be holding the generation back per se. But on the flip side of things, and no slander here really for Nintendo, because I picked up a Switch 2, that's also a very underpowered device that is supposed to be more friendly for third party development, even though we're hearing stories of them not being as I wouldn't say generous, but as easy to get along with to get one of those dev kits. They're basically telling a lot of developers, go ahead and make it for the Switch 1, which we all know was worse than some cell phones as of today. Make it for that, and it'll automatically work on the Switch 2 kind of thing, which we see how much, or how the lack of support for third party or with third party was with the Switch 1. So I don't know why Nintendo's taking that approach, but Nintendo is going to be Nintendo, and people are going to love them for it, regardless, kind of thing. But all in all, I'm not surprised that the Xbox Series S is able to help uplift the development or the optimization for other platforms, including PC for that matter, because it is kind of like a smaller PC. It's not really a lower spec except on the memory. Like, the chipset are pretty much on par between the Series X and S. It's more so the memory and what is allocated for visuals that is kind of its, I guess you could say, drawback or downfall. When you look at things like the Steam Deck, it doesn't have as much for the visuals, but it does have a little bit better pass through as far as for memory. So if you can get something to run on the Steam Deck, you should be able to get it to run on the Series S pretty handedly. It's just a matter of taking that approach, building it for the Series S first, then turn all the bells and whistles up for the Series X, and that should help matters. Larian Studio found it out, after, saying that the potato was the problem. We've seen a couple other devs say the same thing as far as the Series S, and then, magically, like a month later, they come out with a patch where it's able to run the 60 frames just like it could on the Series X. I wonder how they stumbled across that, although it would have been nice if they figured that out on release. I think Gotham Knights was a title that was like that. I think even Control, to some extent, when they did the next generation patch, they were complaining about the memory, and then magically they fixed it. But none of the papers go back and say, hey, what did you guys figure out? Oh, we figured out that if we did it this way, it worked better for all of them. No, but nobody's going back for that story after they, drag the potato under the bus kind of thing. But yeah, I really wish more devs would take that approach. And I don't want to say it's a lazy dev thing. You both guys have brought up good points as far as budgeting. Sometimes it's timing. The publisher might be down your back as far as, hey, we need to release this by Q3 or we're doing layoffs. And a lot of times that's enough of motivation to get that thing out the door, as opposed to go back and be like, you know what, if we really work hard, and this isn't what we usually do on this type of device, but if we focus on this device, it'll help all the others. No, you're worried about making sure you deliver that game so you don't lose your job, kind of thing. So the publishers a lot of times add that extra level of stress on top of maybe tricky development or new style of development or approach on development than what they might be accustomed to as far as when it comes to optimization. Because as we found, especially early in this generation, optimization seems to be like that last stretch mile thing that the devs seem to focus on. Some dev teams, optimization is what they do from get-go, but it's a mixed bag depending on the publisher, depending on the type of game. If it's a graphically intensive game, a lot of times they put more of the focus on the visuals and the engine and making sure it at least is somewhat stable. And then they'll focus on like the frame rates and things like that and the optimization aspects to that. But that's not the case for every developer. But it is good to see that, with EA, the resources that they have, that team did their extra homework to, basically make the game as stable as possible. And we'll see the difference when, the release. I think they did a good job as far as the beta was a lot more stable than what I remember 2042 being. So maybe this will be a sign for a lot of other devs to kind of go that extra mile, or at least take those extra steps, focus on the Series S, help uplift everything else from that, and then you have a much better game at launch where you're not having that pressure of, oh, well, we need to do this day one patch because, well, these two platforms crash at this particular, board or whatever. We could probably fix that in post in like the next 30 days after the launch and stuff. It'd be nice to get games to run smoothly right out the gate. But yeah, that potato is a pretty powerful potato. And hopefully more devs realize that in the future. And hey, it is what it is. The power of tech and the power of the tools. We'll see how next generation goes. Hopefully it leans into the PC approach on things even further. And I don't know what the 2 SKU thing is going to be like. It's sounding like PlayStation's looking at a 2 SKU deal, although maybe one is a portable kind of deal, or handheld of some sort. But I think this is the approach, especially considering how wide the PC space is. And Ames made a post on Blue Sky earlier today. It's like his frustrating rant that it's like after every major release, it's like, oh well, these games are running either great or they're running terrible. Well, it really depends on your hardware. So if you have the latest and greatest, it's probably going to run well. If you have something that's 10 years old, yeah, I wouldn't really expect it to run that great unless you turn all the settings down. So that's the benefit of PC. You have a lot more adjustability. But yeah, with consoles, that Series S can handle its own. And I think we'll see how long it's able to be supported going into the next generation. I think this will outlive the lifespan of what the PS4 is doing into this generation, the next generation. So we'll see.